thank you very much for inviting me here. When I was invited, I started thinking about how I met ATypI the first time. And it happened that when I finished my graphic design studies, that was in 2001, I finished with my first typeface called Trine. And that year, ATypI conference was in Copenhagen. So I went there. And one of the talks I saw was by Trine Rask, who's teaching at the architectural school. And he was telling the story about the Danish type design history. And there was one in the audience asking, but how come they are all architects? And it was a surprising question because that's just how it is. And why shouldn't they be architects? Later on, when I went to The Hague, I was always told that what I do is very Danish. So when I was going to give this talk, I thought that maybe I should figure out what is this Danish heritage and how did it influence me. So I'm going to show you some of this. I grew up in the land of Lego, practical Danish design. And I also, I have to do it like this, grew up in the land of furniture architects, very famous, which was very often related to, if you plan a building, they also designed the furniture, the clocks, the signage, everything. And I also then grew up in the land where all the type designers used to be architects. I'm going to show you some of these. So I'll start with Thorvald Bindesbøll, who was born in 1846. He was the son of an architect, and he became an architect himself. And like all these architects, he was involved with building buildings, but he was also very much into patterns, ornamentations. He did silverware, clay, books, embroidery. His sister was very much engaged in embroidery, so he made a lot of patterns, and they would sell them. And he did books, and he also did a graphic design. On the left, you see a poster for a swimming pool with salty water. And you see all this very nice ornamentation. He had his very own style. He did lettering, and he did many ligatures, which you would see with all these type designers. In the second line, you see it says BADE, so it's a DE ligature. And also in the fourth, you see the gamma, it's the name of the swimming pool, how he plays with the shape of the letters. On the right, you see it's a letterhead. And again, he's making ligatures, he's drawing the letters. So this was very much lettering. He, on the bottom, TB, that's his own ex libris for himself. He also did a logo, and in the top you see this is the what he designed in the Ball Club of Copenhagen on the left. It was back in 1876, and in the bottom this is how it's used today. The very famous Casper from 1904 that changed the most, but also on the right from 1889, and it didn't change very much. We use it today as this. So it was a very huge influence, just something that it was just all over the place, his style, all his things. A more famous type designer, architect was Engelhardt. I think a lot of type designers know him. And he was also an architect. He was born in 1882, and I think one of his most famous is the alphabet for the street signs a bit north of Copenhagen. It was a competition and he won it, and he finished this in 1927. And it's a bit like the Lego, that it's very much thought, it's planned, that how you can simplify the letters, like the uppercase C, uppercase G, it's almost the same. And it's somehow very practical in the way that all the diagonals are cut, because you can then put them together, stack them together. But again, I always wonder why the proportions of the letters are like this. It's not related at all to classic proportions. So I think he just did what he liked, without caring too much about classic type design. Let's see. And this is also just used today. This is a more recent sign. Sometimes when they change them, you can be happy to get one, buy one. And he liked himself very much, or his name. So always there's a little heart in his lettering. And in the beginning, every letter was white, but then people were starting to paint the hearts in red, and later they were produced with a red heart on top. So VEJ says by, it's a road or street. So it's in many of the signs. And if you go to the Danish Design Museum, they have everything he left. He had no family when he died, so all his sketches and objects, they are there, so you can go and see them. So these are from the archives. And there are many very funny, especially these ligatures that he's drawing, and he's, even if it's for a typographic use, it's very much like lettering, the way that he draw the letters. Keep doing this. There are some other sketches you can see. And there's a lot of objects, letters that have been produced in different materials for signage, street signs around the city, or for stores. And also you see here that in the top, the TE, the ND, a lot of ligatures, also for signage. You can see. There's a lot of these. These are very huge boxes. And you see that the reds, they are made of plaster, some are made of wood, and some are made of brass. They're so nice objects. Also the 3D curves are very, very nice to just look at. So enjoyed very much. These are wooden letters. Yeah, just very nice. And when I was studying his sketches, I was wondering why some of his sketches are very poor. And I think these lettering objects are very, very beautiful shapes, but he must have worked very closely with the model makers. So, because you see that he's doing a drawing, they produce an object, and then he's photographing and making comments, and then they rework it. So it's a bit like making a small sketch, a rough sketch, and then work on the computer and then change it. Another one is Gunnar Billman Petersen, who was born later, 1897. So all these people are overlapping each other. And this is the batteries that I grew up with. He did the drawing of the tiger and also the lettering. So this is made in 1937. So again, very nice letters, but also these very playful lettering, like the electricity in the S's, and also the round middle part of the E. It's also very often seen in Engelhardt's work. as an exception from many of these type designer architects, he did lowercase letters. Very often you only see uppercase letters for the signs, but he did a lot of lowercase letters. So this is for the most used flower when I was a child, and he's making the signs about what is the price of the day for the flower. And you see these nicely drawn letters. And also this is sketches for tombstones, inscriptions. I think all these architects, they also did inscriptions, or at least drawing for carving. Very neat work in the curves, and also, when possible, a little ligature in the top. And here's an example of a typeface he did. This was a type competition in 1932. And this is a factory that produced paint. So they wanted a typeface that was very easy to write and paint. And this one won the competition because it was the most beautiful sans serif and very easy to write and paint with this kind of paint they were producing. As you see, we have the A and the Ö, but we don't have the A ring yet, because that was introduced to the Danish language in 1948. Then Claus Acton Friis, also one of my biggest heroes, next to Engelhardt. He was born in 1917. And he did a lot of, again, lettering for signage. This type is called Imperial, and it's been made in the 50s for signage. Again, I always like to study the simplicity of the shapes. Very, very, very simple, and it looks quite modern. And in all his work, it's just so simple and very, very neat. Later in this is from 88, an addition to the imperial alphabet. It's called Torben. So in this case, very low contrast. So there was an addition to that. Right? He also did a lot of lettering for, these are sketches. He's sketching the counter shape with black. So this is for a shop in the main street. And in the top, it's for cigarettes, and he did a lot of packaging. He did a lot of monogram for the Queen, the King family. And you see in some of this top shapes, it reminds a bit of the Bindesbøl curvature. Yeah, and also here, it's another. He did so much cigarette packaging, all the most common cigarette packaging from Danish cigarettes, and also cigars and signage and lettering. And this has been until today a very important part of the architectural study, that you draw letters shaped in a curve for these kind of signage, more than doing a typographic typeface. So now Klint, he was born in 1920. He's not very famous. People don't know so much about him, because I think the rest of them, everyone besides now Klint, there's been a book written about him, about them, but not about him. But he designed the number plates we used to have. We don't use them anymore, but he designed this so everybody will know his letters and numbers. And then some years ago, when the Danish Design Museum was going to have a new identity, and the pitch was won by Urgent Agency, and the director is called Mads Kvistgaard. He's also an architect and a type designer. He comes from that tradition. And what they did was that they took the sketches from Naur Klint of a system called flexibility, and they call it here the missing link, because he did both do lettering and drawing, but also he built some kind of more typographic modern type system, and they did a revival of that. So you would see that the typeface is by Naur Klint, and they did it together with his son Lars Klint, who is still working. And we'll come back to that later on. So one of my living heroes, Ole Søndergaard, was born in 1937, and this was his first lettering piece he did. His father was a sculptor, and he was going to do this monument for Knud Rasmussen, and he was going to carve it. And then Ole, he was trained as a sign painter, but then later he entered the art academy, and his teacher was Gunnar Billman Pedersen, and he did this lettering for the monument, and his father was carving it later on. And this is very much the same shapes you see as we saw before. So this is the same tradition. Ole then in 1999 got a grant. So he got this 3-year working grant to do a typeface for signage, a bigger family. And it was being published at Fund. It's called Signa. And in the beginning, it was only this sans serif signage typeface, but then I think it's still growing. Now it's a serif, there's a stencil, and it's rounded, as you see. So it's a huge family with different scripts. And again, you see the lowercase letters, and it's this very simplified shape, but now it's meant for digital and for text. Ole is also doing, again, this 3D objects, and looking and using the shapes of the letters and playing with them and develop them. So this is an alphabet where every letter has the shape of an animal that correspond with the letter, and the beginning letter in Danish. Very nice. It's a toy now. Another living hero is Bo Lindemann, who founded Contrapunkt, who's one of the founders of Contrapunkt, born in 1953. And he designed this. This is a very early typeface by Bo Lindemann for the Foreign Ministry of Denmark. Again, you see the base of the same letters. He was also an architect and a type designer. And he has been carrying on this tradition from the architects. This is another project he did for the pharmacy in Denmark, and you will see also some of these sketches in earlier work from this style is also seen in work from the other architects. Because it's painted with a brush, and then it's a very formal serif instead of like a more calligraphic kind of serif style. It's more of a modern style. And this on the right is sketches for this typeface that he's been doing in digital sketches for this. And next year, our queen, Margaret, she's been queen for 50 years. So Bo Lindemann has been asked to design all the graphics for this anniversary, and he did this. And you also see, like in the Danish word for queen, you see this ligature, but a very playful style. But it's very obvious that he would be asked to do this. And this is another typeface made by Contrapunkt for the Danish Design Award. And you see the ligatures, you see this kind of cutting of the diagonal of the letters, but in a different way, a more modern way. So this is for the award, and it's also been awarded for this. Yes, and all these people we saw till now, almost all of them were architects. Ole Søndergaard was a sign painter before he got into the academy, and we also had this tradition of sign painting. And this is just for inspiration, like if you happen to drive by a building that they are restoring, you can be happy that they take down the existing sign, and then behind you see this painted signage. And I can photograph them and keep them as inspiration. And especially this G with no descender, but a complete ascender. It's seen a lot of times. There's another example where you have an ascender, but you don't have a descender on the lowercase g. I have no idea when these are from. It's just happened to come by, and then a few weeks later, these will be gone forever. You can see even here, there's a man working on this. But it's a great inspiration, because this kind of handmade lettering, it's quite hard to figure out if you're doing a typeface. This is an example that's been carved in wood, and it's still there. But the funny thing is, it says storage of all articles, or a complete storage of articles, and you have the serif in the top, and the sans serif, and then a slab serif in the bottom. So it's just it's everything. But again, very, very neat shapes, very inspirational. And we have Jakob Ingberg. He's sign painting is becoming interesting again, and there are people living from painting signs, and Jakob Ingberg is one of them. And I think in 2018 he made this book where they went around in Denmark and photographed in different cities all signage to try to preserve them. And also some people working with letters have been interviewed and talk about letters in this book. It's a very beautiful book, and it's a way of keeping them to see all street signs that will be replaced at one point. Well, but with all this in my head, I went to The Hague in 2003. And what I wanted to do, I wanted to learn about typefaces for text, because nobody was doing that. So I wanted to learn about this way that they teach type design in The Hague, and I wanted to learn to design a typeface for text. So in The Hague, we besides designing typefaces, we also had typography teaching. And what I discovered was that we had to do these exercises in our own language. And I discovered that it was very, very different. Like if what language you would use, it would look very different. And for me, it was especially if you're using very classical book typefaces, it looked very different if you see Danish on the left and Spanish on the right. And I found that this text image was very disturbing in Danish. It's the same text, it's the same typeface. So I wanted to discover, to study this, and because I was going to do a book typeface, that was my plan. I wanted to learn how to do a regular, an italic, and a bold, and learn how you do that. But then I figured out that I had to look at this, the pattern, the text image. I was not used to that, and I was studying why is it that Danish looks so curly, so disturbing compared to some other European languages. And at that, I figured out or found out that Danish is the language with most F's and most G's. And if you look at very classic book typefaces, very often these are sometimes they're very exaggerated. And that makes this disturbance in the text. So what I was trying to do was to look, instead of looking at the letters, like I was used to, I had to look at what pattern are the letters making when it becomes a piece of text. So I have to train my eyes to see this. And then I was using this letter meter by Jos van Rossum and Peter Billack, and putting all language that would use the Latin alphabet, and measuring ascenders, descenders, letter pairs, letters, and see what is the frequency of this. And then I could use this information. I could also do a visual study of these languages with the same typefaces to see what should I focus on when I designed a typeface. And I would also see that if you look at the languages that are the family, the closer they are in family, it would also fit with the frequency of letters and so on. So I decided to design a book typeface that was optimized for the Scandinavian languages. So I did, at that time, the most used typeface in printed books in Denmark was Baskerville. So I studied a bit Baskerville, how did it behave? And then I did some exercises trying to make the F more narrow, and also the accent shorter, and the same with the G, that I would make a shorter descender, or change the proportions of these letters, and then see how it would affect the complete page of text. And this is what I figured out, that if I could just reduce this part, then it would not catch so much attention. But I didn't want to do this traditional Danish way that you just remove this part, just get rid of it. So, but I figured out that if I would make this part bigger, then I would get the same effect, that you would get a more attention. It would be a more calm line of text. So I was doing a book typeface, and I was trying to implement this. And then I had some problems with ear, and I figured out with the open type feature, I could just make some variations of letters, so I would make it work well. These are my sketches, and then solve it that way. And then, of course, you could just do ligatures and see, and also measure how often is if-I used, if-I. So you can still get some curves if that's what you want. And in the end, it just looked very calm when you read it. That was my intention. Well, but then I moved back to Denmark, and I started working as a graphic designer, a type designer. I always worked by myself. I was teaching type design, and for many years I always tried to avoid this Danish tradition, because it's very dangerous field because people get very intense because everybody who is a part of this history also have this clear idea how you should treat Engelhardt's letters. So I always just wanted to not be a part of that. I'm not an architect. I just want to enjoy looking at them, but I never thought about designing a typeface that would be this Danish tradition. But the thing is that if you live here, I think you cannot avoid it. So at one point, I was approached by Odense Letbane, and a guy called Jannik Fritjof, he works there, and he was doing this proposal for the tramway that they're going to build, and he wanted them to have a typeface that would be relevant historically. It would be the Danish typeface tradition, and also with a very, very functional. And this is the mood board he did as a proposal, and he also did the first version of a typeface inspired by all this. And then he wanted to collaborate with me to make it into a typeface. And I was a bit scared, because that's what I think this is dangerous, because now how do you come around this? Do you have to respect it, but also maybe if you want to do something new or else, or treat it in a modern way, or so. But another point was that it was going to be used not only as outlines, it was also going to be used for many different signs. And Jannik is very knowledgeable about all this, and he's very dedicated. And the thing is that he was really fighting for getting specific signage, so he could help me with the information about how many lamps. So you have different versions of this typeface. So the hardest, the most simplified version of this typeface is going to be only 8 diodes. So, and you have the uppercase A ring, and you have the descenders, but you only have 8 spots. So what we did was to try to make a version of his sketch in these, where you only had the 8 dots. We're going to make both a regular and a bold. And trying to do this where the most important thing is that you would not mistake letters or numbers from each other. Then we went back to see, what if we translate that into the outline typeface, but make a more optical treatment of this. Also, in the end, we have changed the descender and ascender because we can. Also, the A ring is now allowed to be taller than the uppercase letters. But then this is both it's both this tradition, but it's also coming from this medium that we have. It's very limited, so we just have to follow the possibilities. And then, so we have different signage with dots. So we have to make a new version of each of them. And then we have an outline, a family of 3 weights. And then for wayfinding, like signage, that would be the outlines. And then one of my goals was that we would, maybe this would be in the Danish tradition, but we also wanted to become a text typeface that is usable for any kind of text, because they're going to do a lot of communication in text, and you don't want it to look like a signage typeface that is not working very well in text, and also to expand it into working with in any language using the Latin alphabet. And I think next spring it will be up and running. They are still working on this. And then it happened again, that I was approached by the Virgin agency with Mads Kvistgaard that I mentioned before, who did the revival of flexibility. And they were going to do an identity for the Royal Academy. And it used to be the design school, the architectural school, and then conserving. But it was going to change the name into the Royal Academy in Danish. So they made a proposal. They've been working on this identity for a long time, and they were using replica, this Swiss typeface that was actually inspired by Engelhardt. They saw this book about Engelhardt, and this was the inspiration for designing replica. But then they figured out, why don't we design our own typeface? So Cecilia, who works at Urgent Agency, came up with a sketch overnight. This is the inspiration from Engelhardt, this idea of drawing the letters around and then just cutting some of the diagonals to make them fit better. So she came up with a sketch. This is just done overnight, to do their own version of a typeface that would be inspired by Engelhardt and would work instead of the replica. But they didn't have time, so I was invited to work with them. So what I tried to do was to go back to Engelhardt to see. At that point, I had this idea that this is very, very practical, and this is very much very strict, and everything is being reused and very strict and cut. But if you look at this, and you look at another example where this is just placed on a square paper, but when you look closer, it's actually like he just makes it look like that it's a very strict system. It's just like he draws all the letters like he wants to. There's not really a system. It seems more like if he works a lot on a letter, then it becomes wider, and then some other letters they don't get so much attention, so they are just more narrow or something like this. And another example, this is from Flexibility, when they were doing the revival. You see that now Clint, he has put it into this kind of system. It looks like this is a system, actually like a variable font, where you would go from narrow to wide or from black to light. But actually all these fonts within the family or within the system, they are very different. They are probably made for different assignments, and then based on the same skeleton. So if you look at the different fonts, you would see, just if you look at R, that they are different from time to time. But then some might be more narrow, some might be more wide. And I think he probably had this idea that it could become a system. And this was the base of flexibility. There are also some other typefaces he did. So the idea was that instead of trying to copy this Danish style where you have a horizontal piece every time there's a join, if it gets a bit too dark, which is something that is very suitable for casting type, then we try to follow this idea that all the letters that have something characteristic, like a diagonal, we make them wider, and then some of the letters that are just more plain, we just make them monospaced, and then afterwards, just to follow Engelhardt's ahead, we just change them if it looks wrong. So the system would be like we work a lot on the letters we have an idea for, and then the rest is just filling in. So this was the proposal, and also there's something about this idea of that the G should just be like the C, and all these habits that are not very legible. So we discussed, is it a good idea to do this, or should we just do something more legible to leave this tradition? And then it becomes this, it replaces replica, and also my job was to try to make it into a working typeface. There's display type, there's a text type. So this is the display, where you have very small descenders and ascenders, and then in the back you have this is a regular, and this is the bold of the text typeface. Just again, instead of trying to have this very strong design approach, then make a version of it that is more readable. Simply, there's been a lot of examples in Danish type design history where you would really try to use this display typefaces for text, and it doesn't read very well. So I think this was my job to do that. But I also do other things. I was asked to design a book and about Karen Blixen, and I thought, but I'm more a type designer than a book designer. So, and it was a bit of text, but then quotes from Karen Blixen and photographs. So I thought I would design a typeface that could be used for the quotes. So my idea was that I would try to make a version of something based on her handwriting, but it should not be like copying her handwriting. It should more be like for the people who knows her very well, they would know. So I was studying her handwriting. This is, I think she was 9 years old when she was writing like this. She wrote a lot of letters. She wrote recipes. She wrote her tales. And it's very different. And also throughout time, she developed ligatures, and also ligatures that would be one word. For example, I in Danish, it's J-E-G, and she would just make a sign for that. So I was trying to figure out how can I get something from this to make it a very simplified typeface. What is the characteristics of this? And also maybe get some of her ligatures, some of her characteristics, but some of them would just be very, very hard to read or understand. So this is me writing on top of her, trying to find out nice things that could be a great idea, like some of her ligatures. This is and in Danish. Also, if he has a lot of curves like this on the N and M's, so she's making some of them smaller which is very suitable for reading it better. And then I was just trying to to make it in a way that there would be very few ligatures, but people who knows her will recognize this because of the 45-degree slant and the big X height and different things. There's an example. This is an example of a quote that this is from a farm in Africa. And it would be like this, that you would have a photograph and then a quote from her, because it's about that you are influenced by the place you live when you write as a writer. And again, this is not a complete typeface, because I was designer of the book, so I could just design the basic alphabet, and then I could do some ligatures, or if there are some letters, for example, the F, sometimes making problems if it's inside the word, so you have to do different versions. But again, I would know exactly what the text was, so I could just fix it if it didn't work. And then, of course, this is exactly how she would sign. So, but it's working as a typeface. Yes. Another project where this is more working with a client, where the more, because I do a lot of custom fonts these days, and the big challenge is to try to know the client, or to be invited to be a part of the graphic design, instead of getting informations or just some buzzwords for designing a typeface. And this is an example where it's more like the feeling of the text image, the text pattern that they wanted, and then we were working on that. There is some inspiration for how the letters should like, but it's more about the text image of it all. So this is just the basic alphabet, and then there's a lot of contextual alternates, so you would try to get this same pattern working. And this is both drawing the letters, but also developing this system to figure out how will this work without anybody doing something manually. How could you write a script that will make it work, so it looks more natural that this is handwritten or hand drawn. So and that's, the more you know about how is this going to be used, who is going to use it, and for what, the better it is to accomplish and to make the client happy. I think this is the last project, and that's what I'm aiming for. It is to like be a part of the process. If I'm an external type designer for an agency, the more I know about what the clients want and what the agency is doing, I can do a better typeface. And this is an example where the Bold Scandinavia, and also Kluk Kluk's play was for Bold Scandinavia, well, I was happy to be a part of the meeting with the clients. So the Bold Scandinavia, the agency, they planned this type workshop where they would give different direction, and they wanted the client to tell what they liked. And it was very interesting, because I was always wondering, what are the client and the agencies talking about? How do they talk about type if they are not type designers? So after doing this workshop with 4 different directions, this is what I got out of it, because I was watching what they were talking about. So they like the typeface Druck. That was the first direction. They like it very much. They like this idea that this tradition of posters, and you have great events and huge letters, and impressive letters. But they also like this direction, which was called premium. They like some of these examples, very elegant. But as they said, it cannot be too feminine. That's what the client said, because many of our clients, they are men, and this is for Eurojackpot Denmark. And again, it's like, what is feminine, what is masculine? They like this direction called discovery. They like this idea of a fairy tale. It's a dream come true. When you win all this money, you can do what you want. But we have Tivoli, and they also have a casino. So it's very important for them that it doesn't start looking like that. So, and then the last direction is that it must be trustworthy. So it's serious business. It's not something for fun, but it was important that it doesn't look like a bank. There should be no bank references. This is not about the money. It's about the dream come true. So in the end, what happened is that they liked everything, but they also did not like everything. For some reason, the GIF animation is not working. But what I tried to explain them was what you could do with a variable font. And I was supposed to show you an animation where you would go from this Druck direction to the more fairy tale direction, or something you would see in old banknotes. I cannot show it. They were also doing this layout where they were using Druck, and then in the background here in the pattern, they have a typeface called Restaurer. And I was suggesting that we could make a variable font where you would have you would draw them in a way that they would work as a variable font, and then some intermediate stadium would be something like this. You could use that for a text. But in the end, all this talk about that this and this is the same typeface because it's a variable font, it was very confusing to the client, because they thought they would have to pick. So this became this. And then I cannot show the animation. But in the end, because we had to skip this idea that we should make a variable font, I would just try to draw a version of Druck or something in that style and proportions that would have some elements from the other parts, some more organic. And that would be like a display. We're also focusing very much on the letters, on the numbers. And then with the help of Linda Hintz, who I share my office with, we would make a version that would be a text, but still for display sizes, but that would accompany. And then we could do a bit more, exaggerate a bit more the curves and all this fairy tale, because we'd have a bit more space. And then again, it's very important they work for different languages, because at least the Faroe Islands and Greenland, it's a part of Denmark, so that was very important. And then actually also in the end, because the client said that I only like uppercase letters, I don't like lowercase letters. And because I was a part of the meeting, it was possible to understand that it's because you like this very compact image. And if you have this idea that you have a smaller X height and that would be less compact, I was trying to design a lowercase letter set that would make the same compact image. And actually in the end, they ended up liking this very much, because they just didn't know. So I thought it was very important to be able to be a part of this client meeting, and to understand what people mean, or the client means, when they said they want something modern or funny or it's almost impossible if you're not trying to understand what they think or what they know when they say this, and then try to suggest or try to show them that you can actually, it's not that simple. I think that's a part of the being the expert. So that was my presentation. Yeah.
So thank you. Thanks a lot, Trine. I mean, as always, I'm always surprised and amazed by your work and how deep you can go into the property of letters, and all these characteristics you are putting in the letters is super nice. I mean, these A rings are really like, I mean, how is it? I mean, it reminds me when we are designing the geminated L, that is a character that is only appearing in Catalan. I mean, we can feel it, and we can, because we write it, and as well, you can feel the A ring because you write it. So here, because I don't write it, I just put a ring and that's it, you know. But all these combinations of the character with the diacritic, you can do multiple things because you have mind of that. You know how to do it. We only have, for now, we only have a question that is it's more like, it's from Sungra Lee, and he or she says, I live only 500 kilometers away from Denmark. I live in Hamburg, Germany, but never been to Denmark yet. What city should I visit at first to experience the Danish typographic world?
Ooh. Well, I think you can come to Copenhagen. I mean, there are other cities, but Denmark is very small, and the cities are very small. I remember, Laura, you came to Denmark once, and we went to Odense, was the third biggest city, and you said you keep talking about when we went to that village, and I was just like, it's not a village, it's the third biggest town.
Sorry.
I think if not, you should get this book by Jacob Engberg, and there will be all the pictures, and you would see which city. But I think very often there's a lot to see in Copenhagen. Also because maybe Copenhagen, there's a bigger part that has not been restored. I mean, Denmark is a very neat country, so everything is being repaired and replaced. So, I would suggest that.
Cool. Should we move, should we move to the hangout room, or are we?
Yes, because we've exceeded our timing because of technical problems. But it's not an issue. It's not your fault, so we're fine. I think if anybody wants to continue the conversation, we can go to the hangout room. I would like to thank you so much for this very insightful dive into your practice, which is it's really enlightening to see where it comes from and where it goes and what it becomes eventually. Also, this whole Danish style is very fascinating. I once got in touch with it years ago through a publication by Font Shop Benelux, and there is, I don't know if we can really talk about a national style, but there is this kind of softness within the technicality of those architectural letters that is really fascinating. So it's great to see all these examples and those crazy, for us, these crazy letter forms, some of those lowercase g's, and then the details and the forms of the serifs and so on. It's really fascinating. So yes, I think we can move to the hangout room. So thank you very much, Trine, and we'll see you over there, and then we will everybody else can do whatever they want, but I encourage you to join us over there.
Okay. I have a question, so
go ahead.
Let's do it later on the other side.
I'll do it later.
Thank you, Trine. See you on the hangout room.
Right.
Bye.
See you in a bit.